And let's share. Where's that document? It's somewhere in here. There it is. All right, can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Excellent. All right, so I sent this report to you all in my email yesterday morning. It's coming from the Board of Regents, and it's survey data from the state, from all parents who responded to the survey, who attend charter schools in New York, Unity being in the mix, of course. And so it provides some information on kind of where we were with the pandemic and how parents felt about their experience with our school in the spring versus how other parents felt about other charters in New York State. So it offers some I think, decent enough information. Sample size is rather small. Across the board, it was small. The average sample size was 46. We had a response rate or response number of parents of 66. And so for the mission moment tonight, what I wanted to do is scroll down to the bottom. We can get into the nitty gritty of this during the strategic planning. I'd love to get folks' take on some of the data coming from this, but I want to zoom in on the open-ended feedback and just look at 3 responses that I think we should, the school, our board, et cetera, should take pride in as we think about what we accomplished in the spring, given such a nutty time. And so 3 comments here. The first being from a parent. The advisors and staff at Unity were extremely dedicated and supportive during the closure. They contacted me daily with updates on my children. I'm very appreciative. There's 1. 2, the staff and teachers of Unity Preparatory Charter Middle School went above and beyond to ensure students received the best education and support they could under the circumstances. Our family is truly appreciative of all of their support. I did go through this and kind of look at some of the things that were perhaps very promising, some things that were individual to kids, and then some things where like, hey, there may be a gold nugget of feedback here that we can act on. So that's what the color coding represents. But I'm going to jump down to the last one where caps are used, which means this is with emphasis. So this last parent says, Unity Prep has had the best outcome from teaching remotely. This is from me having to help my nephews with their remote. Their schools were not organized, and they were horrible with the remote. Unity Prep can train all the others. They were superb. They shared the same compassion they had when the children were in school. Their communication is as great as the FBI. I really felt like we were only missing the building. Use Unity as a model for how well they did. Also, they didn't allow our children to just get by. They held the same standards as if they were in school. So, again, some things to be proud of as we think about what was accomplished back then and then what we're building from this fall. And so, again, we'll dig in this data a bit more deeply, but I wanted to pull out a couple of comments coming from parents that I thought were worthy of note. And that's the mission moment for tonight.
Excellent. And we're going to come back to this, I take it?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Had some questions on it. Okay, great. Okay, head of school report.
Sure. So if you have that open, I'm gonna highlight a couple of worthy points here, and I'll start with just return to school, which is a bulk of the report or memo. And so I think that the headline here is just that we're doing school. We're not doing anything other than what we would do if we were in session, only we're just not in person right now. And so a lot of the focus that I have during my day, for example, is what I'd be doing if we were in person with regard to working with teachers and leaders to improve practices in the building, in classrooms, strategically thinking about like challenges we're having and the way in which we come about them. But the challenges are mainly focused on like teaching and learning and how to help kids achieve at their greatest potential. And so that to me is like a big win. So things are going relatively smoothly from the front of being in school for 4 weeks and having never done remote from the beginning of the year before. As you look at page 1, you'll see it's also been a very busy first month of school. We've accomplished a lot and are working through a lot. And so that's encapsulated in items A through I on the first and second page of the report. With regard to strengths with our reopening thus far, and again, we're about 4 or 5 weeks into school, It's been smooth. There's been no disruptions with regard to the plan we set forth and the execution of it. Have there been challenges that we've confronted and will continue to confront? Yes. But in terms of getting the school up and off the ground and gradually building off of what we experienced in the spring, that has been a success. In addition to that, just building off of the spring again, like in terms of access, which is foundational to operating a remote school, things are going as good as last year and better. We've got great systems for responding to student needs with regard to tech. We have all of the infrastructure and technology we need so that kids have what they need to engage. And so I feel good about that. Thirdly, on the enrollment front, in grades 7 through 12, we're strong. And so the actual enrollment is 461 right now for grades 7 through 12. That's significantly above our budgeted enrollment and very close to our targeted enrollment. So we're at 98% utilization in grades 7 through 12, where in most of those grades we've frozen enrollment and will not enroll more because we're at capacity with regard to class sizes in those grades. In terms of challenges, I think the biggest challenge right now is one that's been familiar with us or to us, and that's sixth grade enrollment. Right now, we have 71 kids in our sixth grade. We're budgeted for 88, so we're under enrollment budget-wise in the sixth grade, and our target's 94. So we have lots of seats that we want to offer to kids and families that are not yet taken. And so we're at 76% utilization when looking at the target there in the sixth grade. Right now, the actions taken, I've listed in the memo. The one that is most promising to me right now that is newer and more fresh is reaching back out to our sixth grade families who applied in the spring, showed some interest, and then didn't end up taking us up on our offer. And so we're feeling as if, given what we're offering right now and what we're seeing other schools offer, that reaching back out to those families should gain the attention of those families and have us give a look and reconsider us as an option. So those are strengths and challenges as of now, as I see them, in the first month of school. Any questions there? I'm going to move us forward. And that's just that, like, the next month, like October is going to be as busy as September with regard to getting better at remote learning over time and then continuing to sort of expand on some of the things that we're building from and have been building from now. And so of note, we've administered diagnostic testing at both sites and are now analyzing that data. And so the work now is in having baseline data that we feel good about, that's accurate and reliable, that we can then use in a couple of months to compare how we're doing then to how we're doing now and what growth is taking place. So the analysis of that data is one. Using that data to launch academic intervention groups, in addition to using other data we have, such as prior test scores for students, is something that we're doing now. At the middle school, we launched interventions for reading and math today. So nice step forward in thinking about how we differentiate our instruction in support of kids, given their needs and talents. So that's that. In addition, the other thing that we're preparing to launch, very likely at the beginning of November, are two in-person programs. One, our Safe Centers for Online Learning, where kids that don't have adequate space at home, who have shown struggle in their academic work in school thus far, will have the option of coming into our school in a safe, socially distanced manner and taking part in their learning there. So picture them bringing their laptops to our school in a classroom with perhaps 6 kids, having there be a proctor there who's been trained and knows how to administer that sort of space for kids, and kids engaging in their learning remotely, but doing it in our building. In addition to that, offering opt-in athletics and doing so in a way that is consistent with the way in which some of the rec centers have run here in the city, where there's been some success in having kids be able to sort of see each other, have some activity, and do so in a safe manner. So those are two initiatives that we're not operating now that we'd like to, that we think offer meaningful expansion of the sort of experience kids are getting in school. With regard to other miscellaneous updates, the first is just at about this time last year with our first graduating cohort, I gave you a fairly detailed report on where I think kids were and what the forecasts were for graduation for that class. I'll do the same thing next month for the class of 2021, but the big headlines right now is that there's not a lot of dissimilarities between the two cohorts and what I see as forecasted graduation rates for the coming year. We forecasted 90 to 95% last year. We ended up with more than that. I expect something similar this year. So our target is going to be 90% plus for a 4-year graduation rate for the class of 21 or the cohort of 2017. In addition, we'll talk a bit more about our agreement with our financial consultants later on in the meeting during the AFC component of this meeting. We used a group for our initial renewal 4 years ago, led by Paul O'Neill. Sarah was a part of that team as well. Paul's not available this time around to work with us on a renewal. A busy time of year for him, and so he's not able to take on anyone new. And so I am seeking to bring on a consultant who can help us with that renewal work. I have a couple of ideas, and then Paul has agreed to take part in a few calls with myself, and if others want to take part in those calls too, just to get a better understanding of like the political arena we're operating under, given remote, and what that kind of means for us in renewal, and how we best position ourselves to gain a full renewal, given where we are now. And so I found that to be valuable as a service that Paul offered 4 years ago, and want to take him up on that again. I also believe there's probably less work to do this time around with our renewal application, assuming it's the same as what it was 4 years ago. We've got a blueprint from our first renewal, and a lot of that will involve updates for what we've experienced over the past 4 years, but the sort of general order and scope will be similar. And so that's also coming from Sarah, who wrote a majority of the report for us. So that's the update on renewal at this point in time. I do want to get a call with David Frank and our liaison, Paolo, over the coming month to get a bit more information on what we should expect and what we should be doing right now. And if it's any different than what we were doing 4 years ago at this time and preparing for a renewal application, which is due in August.
John, on the Paul O'Neill thing, like, did we talk to him too late, or what's the story? It just seems like
no. I got in touch with him.
Just be
I got
easy.
in touch with him in August, and we went back and forth for about a month. And I sort of circled back with him a few times. I think he was like trying to figure out a way to work with us. So he came back with me with a few clarifying questions. Essentially, he's got Sarah not working with him anymore, and his other colleague, Stephanie, is not only chairing a board of a CMO in Brooklyn and very busy, but she's also leading a charter school. And so I think they just don't have the capacity. And so that was his issue. So he did say he could take part in some calls right now, but it wasn't something that he could commit to in terms of the full write-up.
What about Sarah?
I floated it, but I floated it lightly, and I don't think she's interested.
Okay. Got it.
I've got a couple of ideas. I'm in touch with Josh knows the consulting world in education, and so I've asked him if he has a couple of leads, and so he's one resource, and then I've got a couple of people from the work I was doing before the school opened who are still in that field. So that's where we are.
I mean, it might be as simple as having one of your folks dust off the old, when you look at the mission and all those pages of stuff in there, not a lot has changed, yeah. I would imagine. So it's just dusting it off, updating it for the new numbers, and then identifying the areas where you've maybe underperformed and building stories around that. It might not be that big an effort this time. I don't know.
That's my feeling. One of the three paths I see here, there are at least two prior Unity educators who are doing different things now for various reasons, who are talented, can write extremely well, know our school, which to me is the big thing. Like when you bring in a consultant and they don't know your school, like you end up doing more of the work. So these folks know the school and they've got a blueprint. And then we've got perhaps someone who can review the report in draft form, who's done this work before it goes out. I feel like that might be a good combination. So And that feels very viable to me. So viable and more cost effective than the last time around.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not super worried about cost, right? I think outcome is more important than cost here. So let's do it right. I'm assuming, and let's come up with a good plan is all I'm saying. I think it's just
yeah. At about the mid-October mark of 2000, whatever it would have been, I guess 16, 17, Paul and team came to our school to sort of visit and get a sense of like what was going on. So it was the first time they'd even seen the school or knew anything about it. So that to me is a good point of like, okay, that's where we were at that point in time, and kind of where do we need to be now to be in the same sort of shape. And so anyway, I do feel like the best next move for me is to get on the phone with Paulo and perhaps David if he's free, and just start peppering them with questions. Like, okay, what's this process entail for us this year? How is it different than our first renewal? What are things that we should tout? And
their priorities might have changed. They might be more, with the COVID in the middle of it, they might be focused on a lot of different things. So yeah, let's get as much information as we can.
And this reminds me of one other fact. And Jeanette, you may recall, like, so when I was on the last time I spoke with Paulo was regarding this sort of cap for students with disabilities, the middle school in ELA. And I got on the phone with the data person there too, just to sort of ask some clarifying questions around like, are we really required to be a part of this? I had some concerns. And one piece of feedback that the data person there relayed to me and that Paulo agreed with was that the survey data for COVID, that's the data we just looked at a moment ago, was going to be something that they believe the Board of Regents would take very seriously as they looked at like renewal. And so I guess having this data now and knowing that it's certainly above average makes me feel somewhat promising with regard to like, okay, good. I did have some concerns back in the spring because we've just been overloading our families with surveys. And so I was worried about the response rate. It's low, but it's higher than the average school. So anyway, last piece here for the school leader report is just around another prospective member to our board. I've been in touch with someone who I've worked with for the past 3 to 4 years off and on. She is a consultant. She's got a doctorate in education. She's been doing sort of STEM, science and math consulting, both with charters and with the DOE. I met her through a partnership with the DOE last year, and she did some consulting work for us in math a year ago. So I've got that sort of firsthand experience with her in the work. We spoke about the possibility of her interest in joining our board 2 weeks ago, and it's something that she would be interested in. She has since submitted her resume to me, which I'll forward to this team. And I think the move here would be to have her take part in a meeting or two in the same way that Earl did and others have as a next step. And so I'll be doing that this week and getting the resume out with perhaps a request of when people are available. I do think she'd make, given that Sarah is out right now and we have 2 members on the SLC, I do think she would be a good addition to our board on the educational front.
Who's on the SLC? Sorry.
Jake has joined, and Jeanette, and Ken.
But Ken is not? Okay. Oh, yeah. All right. Okay.
So, and Ken has been super busy right now, just with like a couple of things kind of on his plate, and so so I know that he's aware of that, and I'm not quite sure where things are going to go with him and his continuation. So we'll see.
Okay. Well, if we can nudge him to stay on, let us know.
Yep. I can and I do.
Well, I mean, if some of us need to join the party, just let us know.
Yeah. So that's those are the additional points coming off of what you read from the school report for this month.
Okay, great. Dashboard.
Okay. I got six updates on the dashboard. And so the first update is table 1, just with enrollment. And so if you look at that table, I've given you the headlines on 7-12, grade 6. You can see that, and you can see it in more complete form in the table. But you'll see overall we're down 2 from our budgeted enrollment. We're at 534 versus 536. Our goal is 566. And so we're close to that capacity in all grades but 6th. And so that's where the work is. For table 4, we'll talk about finance a bit later in the meeting. You'll note that those items are in green at this time, given or as of the end of August. Table 5 provides updates on attendance. You'll see attendance is hovering at around 90%. It depends on how you look at things. Based on past readings, if we're just talking about kids who show up to school, it's probably closer to 95%. It's very different. Like when you're in person, if a kid shows up at school, they attended school for a period. With remote learning right now, it's a little different. And then if a child attends one class, is that attending school? And so we're thinking more about how that relates to learning. And so if you look at, again, 1 period per day, it's probably closer to 95%. If you're looking at attending 80 to 90% of the classes in a given day, it's probably closer to 85%. The work is in identifying those students that are at the lower end and putting forth the proper interventions and communication to support them and encourage them to be in school every day. Table 6 offers an update on suspensions, which is 0 at this point in time over the first 4 weeks. If you recall, we had 0 suspensions all of last spring once we went remote. And then table 10, Board of Trustees, that's just been updated. So you'll see month of September, we were just at quorum at 50%. And we are just above 50% tonight.
Because we got rid of one person. Make quorum.
Finally, table 12, interesting just sort of comparison. So with parent orientation, which we had at the end of September, middle school percent participation rate was 60. At the high school, it was 50. Both of those values were 10 percentage points over the prior year, which was in person. So, and you're seeing that it's easier to attend parent nights when they're virtual. So there may be something to grab here in future years when we have the option of perhaps going in person and or virtual. That's all I've got for dashboard updates. Do people have clarifying questions on data presented here, updates presented here?
Strategic planning, never really understood this one.
So I thought we'd look at
Go ahead.
so for this evening, I thought we'd look at I think there are 2 things to look at, but I think for executive session, we'll focus in on some of the indicators that were presented at the last board meeting and that have been discussed in deeper dive manner with the SLC. But for this session, I thought a good use of our time would be looking at that data coming from families and having a bit of a discussion around takeaways that members of the board who are here tonight have regarding that data, clarifying questions you have. But the idea here being that we've got a fairly good sense of what our families believed was the case with remote learning in the fall, and then how that informs our work now and moving into the coming month. There are 3 takeaways that I find in a very sort of macro fashion in looking at this data. The first is that our families on average seem to think more fondly or more favorably about the program that we put forward in the spring versus the average parent at the average charter school in New York State. And so I've highlighted some of those values that I thought reinforce that. The second is more constructive in kind of digging into gold nuggets where we can see where our parents feel like we can be better. There were a couple of comments. So there was one item here around appropriately challenging work and families feeling versus all charter schools that I guess we had a lower percentage of families that felt like we were offering challenging work to their kids each and every day versus all charters. And that was one of the few areas where we underperformed the average. And so good to know. And I think that's in line with some of the work we're doing now and our priorities for the year, where one of the big priorities is on rigor and engagement for all students and the way in which we do that in classes each and every day. The third piece is, again, promising, and that's just that I think, and that comes from the open feedback, that I think on average for those respondents here who offered feedback, they're appreciative and realize that our team showed up with their child's well-being in mind, academically and beyond. So those are the three sort of macro findings I see here. I guess with that, Jim, you had mentioned that you had a couple of questions here, and then let's open it up.
It was really,
what's here?
Yeah, it was really just one, and it was the one you hit on, which, it looks like from some of this, there were comments at the bottom that sort of go against that, but looked like we're not pushing hard enough here, and the parents are wanting us to push hard. I think there was one comment at the end, I can't remember what it was, to the effect of, just because we're not in school doesn't mean you can inundate them with work. But I think overall, the takeaway I had was maybe we should push harder. Granted, this is in the spring. You're probably doing that now, but
I think, I think that I get. There's there are odds there, right? Some of the findings, and so I think that's true. That's the case. The answer, I think, is around differentiation, and so for the kids that show an ability to sort of take on more and be challenged more, we need to welcome that, and we need to answer that. For those kids that are feeling challenged and feeling unsuccessful or are struggling, we need to also support that. So that to me is the sweet spot.
Yeah, that was the only thing that jumped out for me.
Yeah. How about others? Maybe a question here is, was anything surprising to you beyond, and I don't know if that's a surprise, what Jim identified, but
is there equivalent data for district schools?
Yes, to some extent. And there was something that came out in the spring for district schools too. And so that is available.
Where I'm going, so, I'm a single issue voter. Are there enrollment opportunities here in terms of if people are happy with what you're offering? Is there a population of sixth graders out there that you should be communicating with and explaining this to so they join your program rather than where they currently are?
No, I think that idea resonates with me, and I think resonates or aligns with what I identify as like the best next step for us in addressing the problem of lower enrollment and open seats in the sixth grade. And that is reaching out to those families that initially showed some interest in our school and making sure that they're still okay with the decision they made and that we are still an option for them if they'd like to move to our school.
What about 6 months ago was one thing, right? But now the city seems to be having a lot of trouble getting the public schools restarted properly. And so there may be people who wouldn't have given you a second look 6 months ago who might be interested now. And I know we're starting to be late in the school season, but is there any reason why you shouldn't reach out to people with whom you haven't had a contact yet, sort of a more blanket sort of,
The work that we haven't done, and we've reached out to one other school that's had some success with their sixth grade enrollment. They are doing more sort of like traditional advertising, work on buses and like trains and things. I find that to maybe not be the best use of funding now.
It's probably very expensive.
Using that transportation, right? And it's expensive. We have done some tabling and canvassing recently to like limited success. I think the big advantage that other school has on us when just looking at the two, and they're in Bed-Stuy as well. No, they're in Crown Heights. Is that they've got a fairly thriving elementary school that they share space with that's over enrolled, and they've got a good relationship with that school. So a lot of the students there feed in. We have an okay relationship with our neighboring school. It's good, it's workable, but like it could be stronger. They're under enrolled in their fifth grade. So
so that's not a good source. But yeah, I don't know, social media or something, because I don't think you're going to reach people in the streets, right? I think people are at home right now.
Yeah.
For the most part. So is there any kind of broader push you would consider doing that would reach a population of parents of sixth graders that are not thrilled with what their sixth graders are currently experiencing?
I think this was another option that came up, which I think is smart. This past Thursday during our recruitment meeting, and that is to reach back out to guidance counselors from the fifth grades of schools that we've been in contact with, because most counselors, they care for their kids a great deal. They worked hard to get their kids into the schools that their families wanted their kids to go to. And so if those families are now not happy, it's possible the guidance counselors know that and might then be willing to sort of say, hey, you should give this school a look. They've got a pretty good program right now. It's safe, synchronous, full days of instruction with enrichment. I mean, there are some things we're offering that are certainly and very obviously a step up from the average offering.
Yeah.
In the sixth grade.
Yeah, I just keep thinking about it because it's still a time of the year where you can afford to do it, and it's sort of low cost, but the later in the year you get, the harder it is.
Yeah. That's right. And I appreciate the single voter approach. I went with it too. It was my one concern in the school report today. So I'm with you. Before moving on from this, any other findings? Sal, what you got, man? Usually good for something really good here with regard to data. What you got?
Nothing at the moment, unfortunately. Nothing at the moment.
Okay. So I think with that, Jim, we're go to move on.
I guess, the only thing is that the question I have is, when you're meeting people in person, it gives you the ability to read them a bit and to feel if something's not going right or they're unhappy with something. You kind of lose that to some extent with the remote, and these surveys maybe fill that gap a little bit. How are you providing surveys, not this expansive, maybe 5 or 6 questions to the parents, or how are you getting parental feedback? I mean, we're early.
So it's happening. There's communication among admin and teachers and advisors and allies daily. So we kind of get a sense of who's doing okay and who's not through that correspondence. But I think more structurally, this past Friday in the Scoop, I sent out a survey to families inquiring about how are they feeling about remote learning right now, a month in, and then how comfy are they with the possibility, or would they, if given the option of some optional in-person programming, how open would they be to it? And so it gives us a sense of just comfort levels right now and where people are feeling. So systematically, we can get surveys out in the Scoop every week if we need to. I'm trying to keep it to roughly a monthly endeavor so that people aren't feeling overloaded with survey fatigue.
Okay. All right. Okay, should we move on?
We should, yeah.
AFC, let's do the AFC.
Okay, we're about 7 minutes ahead of schedule for Leslie to come on stage. So she's going to jump on at 7:45. So maybe what we ought to do is
DFC.
The other committee meetings.
Yeah, let's go DFC.
Cool. So I think the updates are in very summary form from the facilities front. Our facility is doing just fine. Custodial staff are there on a part-time basis looking at the building. We do have operational folks there periodically, and so that's that. There are some people using the gym on like a one-on-one basis for like trainings and things. So there's a bit of that going on, but in general, it's not getting much use right now. So I think in addition to that, there's been some back and forth with the developer. I spoke with the owner actually last night just to check in. Nothing really to report out to full board there. It was more of a check-in. And so that's the latest. I think beyond that, LOSI is working through with the developer's architect some of the sort of zoning updates and modifications that we need to move forward with the school in the long term. And so that's in process. I think the board approved that work this past spring. So that's now in action. On the fundraising front, there was just under $2,000 donated to the school through, I think, a few of Jake's contacts this past month and in honor of his wedding. So we appreciate that from him.
How much did you say, Josh?
Just under $2,000 from a few of his guests. And so really nice of him to put that forward and really nice of his guests to think of our school. So I think that's been the action on the fundraising front. And so that's the update for the DFC.
Okay, great. ECPC.
Yeah, so with regard to community partnership, I think Sal and I got on the phone last week. We talked a bit about board membership and some additional people who may be really promising for this team. In addition, we talked about some initiatives, and so namely there were two that we focused on. One was an initiative for our seniors who are going off to school next year, and Sal took part in that initiative with some essay writing support. Sal, you want to say a few words about that?
Yeah, it was a really nice experience. I think this is the second year they did it. Eric Gonzalez was kind of leading off those efforts, and a really tangible, nice way to connect with the students and then give them some help that I think is super important, because those essays are going to be important, especially this year. Going into their freshman year next year. So we had a couple of students work with them, went back and forth for about 2 weeks on their essay. It's pretty personal, some of the stuff they're writing about. And so it was nice to really connect with the kids and give them some feedback and help them tell their story in the best way that we can.
From a strategic perspective and helping kids have as many options available to them after high school as possible, we are looking to have more kids apply early than we did last year. So that's one sort of tweak or refinement we're making based on feedback we got from schools and our observations of things. Hence, Sal got to work with our kids a bit earlier in the year with regard to their essays than last year. The other initiative is just a voting turnout initiative. We've partnered with a group called When We All Vote, which is kind of nationally known and spreading the word. We had over 20 students and family members last week register to vote. Our kids for the first time, those kids were 18, and then some family members who were not registered in New York. And so that was last week. We've got some other initiatives in play for that campaign. There's a mock election at the middle school happening. There's some sort of like info sessions for like informed voter related things at the high school happening. And so I'm just I'm glad that we're devoting time to promoting sort of civic mindedness among our kids and getting families and staff fired up about not just this election, but like just general involvement in the political scene to empower. So that was the other initiative. That's the update there.
Oh, excellent. Okay, great. Then
SLC.
Let's see. Yeah. Have we had? No, we're still good. Okay, SLC, please.
Yeah, I think Jeanette, myself, and Jake talked mainly about reopening. We shared out much of that in the school leader report. In addition, we talked a bit about kids' experiences in month 2 of college, and a few miscellaneous things that I think were also in the school leader report. Jeanette, is there anything else we should double back on from that call?
No, I think it's covered unless anyone wants to delve into the reopening in any more detail.
How are you? Well, have you even done interim testing yet to figure out?
Yeah.
How do you figure out who's lagging?
So I think there are 2 ways right now. We'll get to talk about this momentarily, but 90% plus of our students at the middle school have now taken a diagnostic exam that was created by an external party, and it's fairly commonly used across the country, well vetted, et cetera, aligned to New York State standards. And so we've just now begun kind of diving in that data to get a sense of, all right, where are kids at baseline? How many kids are on par? How many kids are on cusp? How many kids are lagging behind? And so we've got that for math and ELA. I'll share out something fuller next month. There's some funkiness with that data when looking at like grade level trends that are a little different than what we've seen in the past that we're trying to make sense of. And so I want to have a full sense of that before rolling it out. But we have that data at the middle school. The high school administered the exam just last week. They're about a week behind where the middle school is. And so they're now administering makeups this week. And so they'll be in the same place next week as the middle school is. And so with that, we'll have solid baseline data where kids are now. And then from there, we'll administer a second round of assessments using this external party in December to give us a sense of whether growth is positive, flat, or negative. And so that's how we're using this data in alignment with or in conjunction with our own internal assessments, grades, et cetera, et cetera. So this should help us sort of validate the degree to which kids are learning and growing academically at our school. So that's the external bit. Internally, we've got interim assessments internally at the high school going on next week and the week after that. We're now looking, now that we're 4 weeks in, we're looking kind of at trends grade-wise and how kids are doing in each of their core courses. And so I anticipate that being a challenge. I anticipate us seeing some grades that are lower than what we'd like across the board. As it goes back to what you said earlier, Jim. I mean, we're definitely like, there's rigor and more rigor now in our school than what we had in the spring. And so it's about now catering our support to help those kids that like need more support in order to sort of succeed with that additional dose of rigor on the academic end. So again, I assume that we'll be facing some challenges with regard to like how do we best support kids in a remote environment who are struggling academically and some of the limitations of remote. And like I think we've got some good answers there with interventions remotely, and then perhaps some interventions in person in the near future. So that's where I see our conversations going next month and into December.
Okay.
So 7:37. Let's see whether I'm going to unshare my screen and see whether there she is. She's here. Leslie's here. She's in. Leslie, how are you?
I'm good. How's everyone doing?
Hey. All
Doing
right.
okay,
Welcome.
Yes.
So Leslie, we have essentially covered most of the agenda tonight, and so
Okay.
you are one of the main events.
I don't know about the main event, but okay. I'm one of the. Can I share my screen, or would you want me to do that?
Yeah,
Or
let me make you a co-host here. Let's get really sophisticated.
and would you want me to? I'm going to go through the executive summary instead of the financials themselves. Would that be okay, or do you want me to put up the financials and talk to the executive summary?
Record. Why isn't it allowing me to give you? I'm a co-host. I should have the ability to make you a co-host too. Let's see.
You have to be a host to share your screen?
You need to be a coaster co-host, I thought. Chris,
I
if
don't
you were
think so.
present.
Try it, Leslie.
I just host disabled participant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So,
let me try to make Josh the primary host. Give me one.
oh, thanks, Chris.
It's possible that because she's not in the Unity network, I might give her a hard time, but we will give it a try.
If that's the case, I can also flash up Leslie, whatever you need. In fact, I'll prep that just in case. Let's see if it changes now. I'm the host. And Leslie, you are now a co-host.
Cool.
Issue solved.
Okay. Yep. I have it. All right, so that I have it on the right screen. Okay, now let me find what I'm looking for. Okay. So I'm going to go through the first 2 months of financials as of August year to date. So full year revenues after 2 months of activity is projected to be $169,828,000 higher than budget. The main cause and the main variance for the increase is the ESSER CARES grant. That is $165,274. Title grants has increased by $8,912. I think I spoke about that last month in regards to receiving the initial allocation from the state, and we're roughly about $9,000 higher. All of the other revenue items are kept on budget because it's the first 2 months, and it's really hard to anticipate any type of movement at this point or that we foresee in the future. In regards to expenses are projected to be higher by $129,000. And the reason for that is mainly because these are the expenses that are offsetting the ESSER CARES grant. So because it's a reimbursable grant, you have to, and the way the grant was filled out is that you have to have your associated revenue and then you have to have your associated expenses that offset it. The reason why it's not the full 165 is because last year we used some of those expenses to buy some Chromebooks. And just to give you context on the grant is actually can be funded from March 13th, 2020, all the way until September 30th, 2022. So it's around a 3-year grant. And right now, we're expected to use the remainder of the grant that wasn't used last year, this year. In regards to any questions around that before I go into the details? Part of the grant right now, and we have the ability to amend the grant as things change during the year, is that there are a certain amount of teachers that are going to be paid stipends. And, they're doing some type of coordinator assessments with the students that has to deal with COVID and working remotely or in the environment of which we're in. In regards to incentives are up because of maternity leave benefits. We spoke about that last month. In regards to general administration, there were some webcams and tripods that were bought for roughly $5,000, but that's showing that we're over budget, but it's being covered by the ESSER CARES grant. And additionally, we have to have certain, cleaning supplies and PPE, face coverings and things like that are available for the children or the students once they enter back into the building. So we set aside $10,000 for that. That's causing an overage or an increase in that line item, but that's also being covered by the ESSER CARES grant. And as like last month in regards to miscellaneous expenses, the PPP loan interest, I'm taking 6 months of that interest and assuming that we have to pay that interest for this year before we know what's going to happen with for forgiveness, because we're not quite sure when the banks are going to be ready or open to forgiving the loan, or at some point we give them the money is returned. Outside of that, all of the other expenses are pretty much on budget. So with that being said, after 2 months of school spending, I guess, net income is projected to be $233,950 versus a budget of $193,000, which gives us an increase of $40,198. Any questions on the P&L before I move to cash? Okay, in regards to cash flow, cash on hand as of August 31st is roughly $4.7 million. And this includes the escrow balance. And the escrow balance was actually funded as of September. So now the escrow balance will not be included in the cash on hand balance once I report it going forward. Cash on hand without the PPP CARES loan will be roughly $3.1 million. And this represents 90 days of cash on hand without the PPP CARES loan, and 137 days of cash on hand if we include the PPP CARES loan. On a cash flow basis, cash is expected to be carried over into full year 22 to be roughly $2.8 million. And as of October 7th, cash on hand in the FOMB account is $1,026,924. Any questions? Moving on to one of the other topics that we spoke about at the Finance Committee meeting was the loan summary calculation and the expenses that are eligible for forgiveness through the PPP CARES loan. As you know, we borrowed $1,573,200. The funding term that we're using is a 24-week funding term, although of that funding term, we're using roughly 9 weeks of that funding term. We're using a pay period that includes as of May 15th through July 15th. So that's roughly about 5 pay periods. With that, the compensation, so what makes up the $1.5 million? Of that, about $1.4 million of that is compensation. So how that compensation was calculated, it was calculated based on payrolls of the 5 pay periods, stripping out any of the title funds. So if somebody was tagged for any of the title fund grants, we did not use that portion of their salary for forgiveness for the PPP CARES loan. Because the way it's envisioned that, because you're getting a separate grant for that money, you cannot then use the PPP CARES loan for that as well. Additionally, we use state unemployment insurance for 3 months, and the 3 months is May, June, and July. We use medical insurance, dental, and vision for the 3-month time frame. So that brought us to $1,572,478. A little, about $1,000 or so shy of the total amount of the loan. So with that, we're also able to use some non-payroll costs, and those payroll costs are things like telephone, internet, and copier lease. So that will bring the total forgivable expense to $1,583,548, which is more than enough than we would need for forgiveness. Any questions?
Why is rent not included? Yeah, why is rent not included?
Okay, rent is not included because we get the facility reimbursement for that, the lease assistance, so we can't use the rent for that.
Okay, but Leslie, remember, we've had this discussion on the AFC,
Yep.
and I think we need to talk about it. To me, the rent being covered by the facility expense is no different from the other expenses being covered by the per pupil. Or at least I would like somebody to explain to me why it's different and why we're concluding that, stuff that's covered by the per pupil is forgivable versus stuff that's covered by the rent reimbursement is not. And I'm open-minded here, but I'm trying to understand what the underlying theory is. And I think Leslie was going to go back and talk to other people at CSBM and tell us what she was able to find out.
I have an explanation.
Okay.
It's not, I'm kind of torn like you, Mariam, and I don't know if I'm speaking for you, but this is what I'm torn about for the PPP CARES loan. I don't feel that the schools were put in a position where COVID really impact them, right? And this is just purely my my thoughts. I'm not speaking for CSBM or anyone else, because they still receive the full amount of their per pupil funding, you know, from March on until the end of the year, right? So with that, so stating that fact with the discussion that I had at CSBM, how it was explained to me is that when you get into things like title and the facilities reimbursement, you almost have to answer to a donor, right? Because those funds are specific or restricted to those particular events. So in order to get the rental, you know, you have to have the rent. In order to get the title, you know, you have to prove that. The grant, you know, you have to show at the end of the year. The per pupil is considered like an operating type of money.
Okay. So it's not restricted in any way. You can use it on whatever you want. And so therefore you can claim that it doesn't cover these things for this purpose. Okay.
Right.
Okay. I hear you. I still think and for everybody's benefit, we had a fairly lengthy AFC call because of this and other reasons on Friday. And the good news is that the 24-week period that we have is coming to an end sometime this month, but after then you have a number of months to ask for forgiveness if that's what you're going to do. So this is not something that we need to make an immediate decision on. There's enough money that's been spent in ways that are permissible that if we conclude it's all the right thing to do, we'll be able to do it. We're still faced with what to me is a little bit of a difficult question of deciding what we have to do or what we should do, and we can think about that. We can see what other people are doing. We can see what guidance there is out there. We can see whether or not there's still more noise about reducing the state budgets that's such that the per pupil is going to go down, and maybe we have a better moral case. I don't know, but I think it requires a lot of consideration, and it doesn't have to be decided today. Would be my
I completely agree. I completely agree. And just to clarify, these are 8-week numbers, not the 24 numbers.
No, those are 24-week numbers.
The compensation is 24 weeks of compensation?
No, it's not 24. It's about 9 weeks. If I use the 8 weeks, it wouldn't have been enough to cover the loan.
It's used up anyway, right? It takes 9 weeks to use it up, so we went with 24.
To be clear, if we use the 24, there are two options. One's 8 weeks and one's 24 weeks. If we use the 24-week option, these numbers roughly triple almost. So there's no question the money has been spent on qualifying expenses. Let's put it that way. We've crossed that hurdle, so we can step back and, as Mariana is saying, watch. We have no idea what's coming next to it. We all we've had a rough couple of months. It might get rougher here. So, but this is good to know. I think So let's wait and see. Nothing to decide tonight, as far as I'm concerned. That I've had just anecdotally, I've had a number of my companies that I'm invested in apply for forgiveness and get it already. And so banks are accepting the forgiveness applications now, and very simple. It's really interesting. I mean, I don't know. The forgiveness doesn't even go into what did you spend this money on. It doesn't try to make distinctions. It simply says, what was your payroll for 24 weeks? What was your rent for 24 weeks? What were your utilities? That's it. Oh, and your headcount. If you had a headcount reduction, I don't know how that factors in, but that's something. And that's it. And you answer 4 questions, maybe 1 or 2 more. And so it's kind of interesting. I think a wait and see approach is prudent right now, and let's see how this kind of plays out. But it looks like certainly our expenses. Look, nobody's taking big bonuses and nobody's paying dividends to shareholders here, and it's all going to the right place. But let's be prudent and see what happens here. Okay.
And I think it may also require, like, once the forgiveness application does come out, communication with your lender.
Yeah, in fact, let's make a note. I can text them tonight. See what the process is. Okay,
But
I'll do that
let's
now.
say, obviously, to the extent you find out through CSBM or otherwise that people are applying or not, or receiving it or not receiving it, and that'd be helpful to know.
Okay. Any other questions?
None here now.
Okay.
Leslie, thanks for the update.
No worries. If
Thank you,
I find
Leslie.
anything out on any front, as always, I'll be transparent.
Okay.
How
All
you
right.
been?
Terrific.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
We should talk about the CSBM contract.
Yeah, I think should we do that
Let's
in
go
executive session?
executive. Yeah, we'll do that in executive.
Okay.
So I think the next items are just approval items.
Okay, I was just texting our lender as we're speaking. Okay, approval. Okay, so the first item is the minutes from the prior meeting. Did anybody have any comments there? Sorry, I'm just pulling them up. I do not recall having any questions. Okay. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor of approving? Very good, thank you. And then I think the second item, I think we should table. I saw some questions come out today. That's okay with everybody? The CSBM. And I don't know who the right well, we can take it offline. I don't know who the right person is to assign to answer.
Mariana, is this something where perhaps there's approval to then have parties make a decision?
I think we should. So here's the 2-minute kind of PG overview. Our last contract expired June 30. We've been paying CSBM on a monthly basis until we reach a better arrangement, which I didn't really know. And sorry, I have a screaming toddler. And we, if we're going to do this with them, which it sounds like we will, it is better to negotiate an agreement than to keep paying them as services are incurred on a monthly basis. So what we were thinking we would do is have the board approve entering into an agreement for no more than, Jeanette, I think you, hopefully you have it because I don't have it in front of me right now. I can dig it up, but their proposal was, hold on. It was 130 something.
Right, about 130,000.
Yeah, so, if we could get approval to incur no more than, say, 140, to the extent we are able to negotiate an agreement that we're comfortable with, which this draft we're not. But if the board could do that, then it would save us the trouble of having to call an executive session, and it would also save us some money because we wouldn't wait until a month from now and sort of add one more month to the bill. And the hope would be that it would be kind of somewhat similar in scope to the 3-year agreement we had before, except it would be for just 1 year. And there's currently some differences that we can discuss in due course, but that would be what we propose to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can go. Can we? I think there was an email that went around. We can go over after we're done with this call.
Yeah, I just think we'd need a vote to be able to.
I think conceptually. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so all in favor? I'll leave it to you, Mario, and to draft or whoever it is. All in favor?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, terrific. Okay. Okay, public comment. I don't see anybody else on. Okay. Last thoughts. Any last thoughts?
Yeah.
I don't have any. I don't have anything really to say. I think we should move on to the next one, and we can talk about some of these.
I thought I'll mention just what's coming up. I think for the next meeting, Jim, which is just that we have in the past done a board assessment or self-assessment in the fall each year. And that's like something which is just best practice, and so we can continue with that. And so I think that would be something on the agenda for next month.
How's Earl's application going?
It's in process. I probably I should have reached out to Earl before the call. I saw that he accepted the invite, but I should have reached out and just been clear about him taking part in tonight's call. So I'm sorry I wasn't here tonight. That's my bad. But he's waiting for one. There's just a transcript from a grad school, which is coming via mail or something like that. So that's the one item. Other items are revisions to charter. I don't know, this could be different this year given that we're in a renewal year. I recall including in our renewal application revisions to our charter. So the December deadline that typically is the deadline may not apply to us in a renewal year. So I need clarity there. But
are there any plans or any that you anticipate?
So. You know, there's you and I can kind of chat offline. I think there's some confusion about what our max enrollment is and what was passed by the state. And so I've done a bit of a dive on that a couple of days ago. And like, there's a question of whether it's 655 or 615. And so I want to speak with you about some of my correspondence with the state as of June of last year. And then my next steps in kind of communicating them to figure out and ascertain whether it's 615 or 655. If I go to state's website, it says 655. If I look at our last correspondence to state, it says 615. So I want to get some clarity there. That would be the only item that might need to be clarified in some way through a revision. Beyond that, I don't see any other revisions necessary. And that's it.
Wasn't it an issue if we kept decreasing our enrollment size?
Well, yeah, I think we were strategic about that. And so we were at 655. We were at 784 initially with our charter. We then dropped down to 655, and then we applied to change that to 615 given the size of our high school building. A lot of the AFC report that we put out each month and like our enrollment percentage versus our max enrollment, like that percentage is based on 655. And so recently what we've seen is 82% capacity, which is below the 85% threshold that we would want. If we're at 615, however, which is where I think we should be, that percentage is closer to 90%, which then it isn't an issue. So I see the worst case.
Sounds like
the charter office didn't like when we like steadily went back and reduced our max.
Well, I think they don't want to go back to the Board of Regents numerous times to make this change, because if one school does that, other schools do it to avoid, sort of looking negatively with regard to their enrollment. So I get that. Their other consideration was mainly out of our interest in just saying, hey, look, you can change your enrollment, but just know that like once you decrease your max enrollment, it's very hard for us to go and advocate for you to the Board of Regents to increase enrollment.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
But am I understanding? It sounds like, Josh, you think what should have been approved was 615, and there's just confusion over the right number. Is that?
Yeah. I've got some pretty clear correspondence on like it should be 615. I mean, that's what our board approved in March or April of 2019, and then that was the correspondence in written form with our authorizer. At the same time, though, I was told that the 615 was approved by the Board of Regents in the June meeting of 2019. I looked back at that series of minutes and didn't see us listed. So I have some open questions that I just need some clarification on.
Okay.
So I think with that, Chris, if you're there,
Sure.
the meeting is adjourned and we'll go into executive session.
Sounds good. Have a great evening, guys.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for